Hey everyone, welcome. So today we're going to talk about a really powerful mental technique called reframing. We're going to blend a little bit of behavioral economics with a super cool analogy from quantum physics to give you a practical way to, well, change your own reality.
Okay, let's just dive right in with a classic example. Imagine you have to get a surgery. Surgeon A comes in and says, the survival rate for this procedure is 90%. Then Surgeon B says, the mortality rate is 10%. Now, the information is exactly the same, right? But be honest, which one would you trust more?
Yeah, if you're like most people, you're probably leaning towards the 90% survival rate. It just feels better. And that right there is the power of framing. The words we pick don't just describe something, they totally change how we feel about it, and ultimately, the choices we make. One frame gives you hope, the other gives you fear.
So, what's going on here? Well, this is a well-known cognitive bias called the framing effect. It basically means we make different decisions depending on whether something is presented as a gain or as a loss. It's a little trick our brains play on us, and most of the time, we don't even notice it's happening.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at this word trap and how it colors our reality. Then, we'll introduce a mind-bending idea from quantum physics. After that, we'll get practical and learn the technique to rotate our mental filter. And finally, we'll see how you can start using this in your everyday life.
All right, let's get into part one, the word trap. You see, the words we use aren't just labels we stick on things. They are so much more powerful than that. They actively shape and create the world we see around us.
You know, we all like to think we're seeing the cold, hard facts of the world, right? But the truth is, we never do. Our perception is always passing through a filter, and that filter is made of language. So what we think is a fact is actually an observation result that's already been colored by our words. And get this, these frames literally push our brains in different directions. When you hear a gain frame, like survival rate, we tend to play it safe. We want to lock in that good outcome. But when we're hit with a loss frame, like mortality rate, we can suddenly become huge risk takers because we're so desperate to avoid that bad outcome. Okay, now for the fun part. We're going to connect all of this to a really cool and maybe surprising analogy from the world of quantum physics. This is where we stop just talking about the problem and start seeing reality in a completely new light.
So in the quantum world, before you measure something, it doesn't really have a definite state. It exists in what's called a wave function, which is just a fancy way of saying it's in a state of all possibilities at the same time. You can think of it like pure white light that actually holds all the colors of the rainbow inside it at once.
So how do words fit in? Well, our words, the frames we use, act like a polarizing filter. When that light of pure possibility shines through our linguistic filter, only one of those potential realities makes it through to our perception, the one that happens to match the angle of our filter.
So you have the exact same situation, that wave of possibilities. If you use a positive frame, your filter is angled for success, and the reality that collapses into existence for you is one of hope. But if you use a negative frame, your filter is angled for failure, and what collapses for you is a world of risk. The underlying potential is the same, but the world you experience is completely different.
So what do we do if we're stuck seeing the world through a filter that only shows us the bad stuff? Well, this is the solution. It's a practical, hands-on technique for consciously rotating that filter and seeing all the other possibilities that are out there.
It's called a quantum nudge. And it's really just the act of becoming aware of the filter you're using. You see, a truly wise person knows they're never seeing reality as it is. They know there's always a filter, and they've learned how to consciously choose the angle they're looking from.
And there are two main ways to do this. First, you can simply reframe. That's like rotating your filter 90 degrees. If you only see the negative, you consciously force yourself to look for the positive. The second way is to use a multi-filter approach, where you layer several different perspectives on top of each other to get a much richer, more accurate view of what's going on.
Now, using multiple filters helps us avoid something called decoherence. That's just a fancy word for all the information you lose when you're stuck looking at the world through a single, biased lens. By using lots of frames, your picture of reality becomes much more consistent and, well, coherent.
Let's make this super real. Think about an argument you had with your partner. Your default, single filter, is probably, they are wrong. That frame collapses reality into a battle, a conflict you have to win. But what if you rotate the filter? What if you reframe it as, we are having a misunderstanding? Instantly, the reality shifts from a fight
to a shared puzzle you need to solve together. See? Same situation, totally different world.
All right, so how do we actually make this a habit? Because this isn't just a neat little thought experiment. It's a tool that can fundamentally change your day-to-day observations and, by extension, your entire life. So let's wrap this up. Here's what you need to remember. First, reality is just a wave of pure possibility. Second, your words act as a filter on that wave. Third, that filter literally creates the reality you see and feel. And fourth, and this is the most important part, you have the power to consciously change that filter anytime you want. This quote really just says it all. If you feel like your world is dark and negative, if you feel stuck, it might not be the world that needs to change. It could just be the angle of the filter you're looking through. A filter that's only letting the darkness pass through. And that brings us to the final question I want to leave you with. Think about something in your life right now. Maybe something that's been bothering you. The reality you're seeing. The way you feel about it. Just ask yourself, through what angle of filter has this passed? And what else might I see if I just decide to rotate it?